Welcome to another episode Beyond Perception, where it's really about discovering ourselves beyond our limited perception. My name is Simon, and I'm very excited to speak here today with Timothy Conway. Timothy, from what I know, you had a spiritual awakening very early in your life. You became a spiritual seeker, a monk, studied with many great sages, and around 40 years ago, you were encouraged by Annamalai Swami, a spiritual son of Ramana Maharshi, and Nisargadatta Maharaj, to share non-dual or Advaita spiritual perspectives, which, from what I understand and know, you have been doing this then in different ways and forms. And yeah, it is really a great pleasure to be here with you today. So welcome, Timothy.
Thank you, Simon. Simon, as they call you beautifully in Europe. Yes, it's all grace that we exist at all, that anything arises in form, moment by vanishing moment. And I was very lucky to, through no good karma in this life, I was just a sports addicted youth. But at age 16, when a number of knee injuries made it clear I had really no serious future in sports, I just became very open, and there was a sense of loss of future possibilities, since I had been so obsessed with sports, which had been my religion basically growing up. So in the emptiness and openness and nothingness, I began to contemplate what was the no-thingness out of which God emanated the cosmos and all these worlds and countless gazillions of beings. I became fascinated by that no-thingness. And I got very ill with strep throat, as we call it here. And so I was out of school for, I think, a good week or more, which did even more to kind of bring that sense of renunciation and letting go of everything, no involvement. And then one day out in the backyard, just doing some calisthenics to try and get energy back when it was time for me to get back to school. The doctor said it was okay, I was no longer infectious and that sort of thing. I just did some calisthenics after one of the days, and everything just opened up. It was clear to me we're actually made of this reality. That word became very strong for me, reality, even more than God, which I was aware that people had different conditioning around, and some people didn't like the word God or had weird notions about the divine. If the lighting is changing and looking strange, it's because, again, the sun and the clouds here. We had a very cloudy morning, but suddenly it's all coming out and it's casting interesting light through some very high windows, which would be hard to deal with.
Yeah, it's all good.
Block the sun. Anyway, why should we block the light? We are the light, and we find light all around. And that's what the experience was at age 16, such as it was, an experience, a powerful, absolutely life-changing experience. Everyone thought I was on hallucinogenic drugs thereafter, but it wasn't the case. I've never touched hallucinogens. I realized not only is there a natural high from just being one with this pulsing, scintillating, shimmering moment of a light emanated cosmos. It's not just about being high on that, the rush of all this amazing energy we're always permeated by and made of and surrounded by. It's not just getting high, it's getting really clear on what's right here. And when we get really clear on what's right here, we realize what we are as this open awareness, this vast open capacity for experiencing and having emotions and behaviors and beautiful intentions arise, various virtues. Some vices will arise after awakening, but those no longer are very interesting. They seem contracted and deranged, frankly, forms of selfishness, meanness, pettiness, all of that just evaporates in the light. And by the grace of what we are, of who is really here, the one divine, the reality dreaming everything and being everyone, by the grace of this, capital THIS, this, graceful, gracious, divine reality, all sorts of virtues start spontaneously blossoming. And, maybe the prime virtue of all, the deep empathy, realizing that this true self, this great divine reality, it's not just inside a me, a body, mind, ego, G package, which is just an instrument. But we find that all instruments throughout the cosmos, all phenomena, all beings, all places, all worlds are permeated by and shimmering with this graceful light of the self, the God self, the divine reality. And we have a lot of names for this reality across the traditions. And they're also beautiful, like the Brahman, the great divine reality, which is not other than the Atman, the true self of all. The great Tao of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi in ancient China. The Godhead manifesting from supra-personal nature, the persons of Father and Mother, Son and Holy Spirit, as the Christians came up with. The Ein Sof of mystical Kabbalah Judaism, which gave rise to Hasidism, and the idea of the, all beings are just the Xenor, the conduits, the channels for the Ein Sof manifesting through the Sephirot tree, down through the Shekinah, to all creation. The Sufis have all their beautiful 99 names of Allah to describe this, the reality, formless and yet forming, as all of the cosmos and all the beings. So when this is clear right here, you don't need to get, quote, high. There's nothing particular to seek. But there is a holy aspiration after selfish seeking for God as an it, an experience, an energy, a thing, an object. When that seeking falls off, as one of my mentors, Sri Nisargadatta, and his guru, Sri Ramana Maharaj, made quite clear, there's a spontaneous holy aspiration. It's like the whole instrumental nature, merely an instrument. Now I'm speaking of the body, mind, ego, G processes and phenomena. They light up with this divine light, and they are allowed to be made more wholesome and holy and free of conditioning, unwholesome conditioning. And then various kinds of beautiful conditioning come in, like you may have certain talents as someone who loves his wife Brenda and interviewing your guests. You might be a great orator. You might have musical capacity. New skills can develop, old skills can be utilized for the sake of just sharing bliss and kindness and love. And it's all rooted again in this divine empathy that realizes the self is omnipresent in each and every one. How fantastic, how miraculous that any phenomena appear out of this noumenon, this great absolute, is always here, closer than close, and in everyone you see. So the realization has basically been this all the way through. True realization has a stamp of changelessness and absoluteness and solidness, unshakable, seamless, not fragmentable. And that is whole, holy. And it exudes and emanates as wholesome intentions and behaviors and beautiful virtues. And there's so many beings who have lived this, are living this, are being graced by this. And it seems more and more just waking up to the simplicity and naturalness and gorgeous radiance and beauty and miraculousness of this, the great formless divine reality, which is miraculously forming everything and everyone.
And what you're describing is what is termed self-realization. To wake up from the dream of our identification with the experience itself. How would you describe what the teachings of non-duality are about to our listeners who are not yet introduced to maybe Advaita or these teachings?
Yes, Simon, the awakening is to this solid, seamless, omnipresent, always already the case reality. Sri Ramana Maharshi, the great sage of South India, whom I know was extremely powerful and profound and gracious in the life of Simon and Brenda and your beautiful doggy Coco, no doubt, from way back. Sri Ramana spoke of realization as actually he was speaking very playfully, as a misnomer, because realization implies that something becomes more real. But Ramana made clear there was always only this reality of the divine self, the unborn, changeless, infinite, eternal, omnipresent self. Always already the case was the phrase he beautifully used. So Ramana said, realization is not so much a matter of coming upon the real as some kind of object or phenomenon, or making something real happen. The real is always reality. The self is always the self, our open, true awareness nature, pure, lucid spirit, absolute being, awareness, bliss, Satchidananda, as the ancient Upanishads speak of. This is always the reality. So Ramana said, just stop the effort to try and make real what's only merely phenomenal, only relatively real. That is, the experiences of body, mind, and that sense of self, ego, jiva. And some of us, we don't make a bogeyman out of ego tendencies. We see that they're part and parcel of the whole process of evolution on this planet and cellular evolution in the subtle world. So I use a term like ego-ji, just like we would say Babaji or Swamiji, and affix that suffix of ji, a term of endearment. We can apply this to ego-ji because all egos, all jivas, all souls, all personal consciousnesses, or what we could simply call all viewpoints that the reality conjures up, gazillions of them. These viewpoints, these ego-jis, these personal consciousnesses that arise in the suprapersonal, they're all instruments of the divine. But Ramana said, stop trying to make the bodily, mental, and ego-ji phenomena some kind of absolute reality. And when this ceasing to reify or thingify occurs, there's a profound relaxation and a natural opening back to this which is always open. There's an awakening to the reality which has always been here. How else could any body, minds, ego-jis, or worlds, heavens, hells, Titan realms, ghost realms, how could any of these realms exist without the self? How could you right now, oh dear listener, what is allowing the mind to function, to understand words, to speak words of love, hopefully to your loved ones all around? So Ramana made it very clear that self-realization is awakening to the always ongoing reality of the true self, which permeates all time moments and all spatial places. And yet this, capital THIS, is always intrinsically spaceless and timeless, therefore infinite, eternal. So it's very natural, very at ease. That's why Sri Ramana, Swami Gyanananda, a great, great Advaita sage who lived about 45 minutes away after he'd wandered around India and settled in a town called Tutukoyala, about 45 minutes south of Annamalai, where Ramana Maharshi was. Another great sage in that era, Yoga Swami from Jaffna, Sri Lanka, the Tamil Hindu northern part of Sri Lanka. They all had this saying in Tamil language of South India, Suma Iru, be still, be still. And that doesn't mean you have to try and live like a statue, you know, frozen, immobile, unresponding, insensitive. No, Suma Iru means at your innermost core, let go of the restlessness to try and make that more than it is. Because what's actually always already here is so magnificent beyond words, beyond conception, that you can't thingify your divine no-thingness, the source of all things. Which is why in Zen, Chan and Zen and Son Buddhism in East Asia, China and Japan and Korea, they have this marvelous old saying like, don't add legs to a snake. No need to be artificial. My teacher, Sri Nisargadatta, that very name that he took on as an enlightened poet after his guru, Siddharameshwar, kind of zapped him open to the absolute. His very name, Nisargadatta, that he took on, and datta means like given, divinely given. And Nisarga is a conjoining of two root words, and they basically mean without artificial limbs, without extra appendages. So his very name almost translates like an Indian translation of that old Zen idea of don't add legs to a snake. And he would speak of this as the natural way, finding what is truly our true nature, and the true nature of everyone we meet. Not just a bodily form, an object, thing out there in one's visual field, or someone out there to touch or slap on the back or hug. No, the true essence of everyone we meet is this vast, open, omnipresent self-nature. Bright, self-shining, lucid awareness. Clear light. Ramana and the ancient Upanishads, our most ancient wisdom texts that first introduced our non-dual wisdom revelation to humanity. It was at first the secret forest teaching, which is what the earliest Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka, means. Aranyaka is the forest. The secret forest teaching that was revealed beyond all the rituals and everything that were being practiced in the towns and cities, all those old kind of magical, superstitious Vedic rituals, is that the sacrificer, the sacrifice, and the one to whom one sacrifices the sacrificial objects, all phenomena are pointing back at the omnipresent thou, this Brahman reality, thy true self, the Atman, or Paramatman, the supreme self of all selves, the one sentience by which all sentient beings are sentient. So just like it might seem that in a night sky, the moon shines by its own light, but science has shown us, no, the moon is not self-luminous. It's an object, or if you will, an instrument for reflecting the light of the sun, the source of this solar system. And in the same way, we don't shine by our own light, nothing does. And so to look for a luminous object takes one away from this self-shining, clear light, luminosity of the absolute self-nature, the one alone. And so non-duality, Advaita, means that all apparent plays of opposites, like the positive and negative electric charge, the different directions of spin in an atom at the subatomic level, all these amazing processes, male and female, light and dark, all of these pleasure and pain. We could go through hundreds and hundreds of pairs of opposites. They all inhere. They all find their true reality in this seamless reality that includes all the opposites, and therefore is the oneness principle for all of these phenomena throughout the cosmos. It's like a giant dream being conjured by the suprapersonal divine. And we use the word Advaita rather than ekatva, oneness. We use the word Advaita, non-duality, just to make it clear that the formless, transcendental, absolute source of the universe is not separate from the space-time phenomenal play of the cosmos with all the processes and beings and energies and play of opposites and all the gazillions of different sentient beings throughout the cosmos. None of these are cut off or separate from the transcendental principle. And so non-duality really gives rise to our most sophisticated theologies that later mystics worked out within all the other religious traditions. For instance, in Christian mysticism, Muslim Sufi mysticism, Jewish mysticism, the Taoists and different lineages of Hindu later traditions, 1,000, 1,500 years after the Upanishads. They were all working out a theology, basically, and an applied spirituality of non-difference between the absolute and the emanations of the absolute. No real fundamental distinction between the noumenon, the singular reality, formless, always clear, and the emanations, the phenomena emanated by this noumenon, this divine reality. And so a simple way of expressing non-duality or Advaita is that the divine is beyond all this, absolutely formless. No thing, no thing, no thing. Just clear, lucid, pure spirit. Utter transcendence, and yet also immanent in all these forms and beings and objects, all the processes of conception and birth and growth and aging and death, disappearance. And so one never need feel alienated. The true teaching of non-duality is that God is always your truth. That which is to be realized is always here, real, pulsing the blood in your veins and breathing the breath and minding the mind processes, activating them, animating them. And that's why, whereas original Upanishadic sagely revelation from ancient India is Vedanta, the culmination of the Veda in this new Vedanta teaching of only the absolute reality is real. And all in here, they take their apparent experientiality in this original reality. In that original teaching of the Upanishads, they mainly speak of the formless reality as Brahman, and the whole cosmic play of forms that arises through the pranava, the original vibration, Om, Om, Om. This seed, magical seed for miraculous manifestation of all the cosmos and all the differentiation. They'll speak of the Brahman and the Maya, the illusory play. It literally means that which is measured out in space-time, like we would measure out the history of this universe, say, going back to that pre-Big Bang moment as astrophysicists and cosmologists and others have tried to sleuth out the inflationary moment just prior to the Big Bang. And it's very complicated physics, but the simple idea is everything arises from this original no thing, potential for vibration and vibrational differences. So the ancient Upanishads speak of Brahman and Maya, but later in India, they didn't want that to sound too impersonal. And so to account for the rise of all these impersonal and personal instruments and phenomena, they came up with the kind of spiritual mythology, some would call mythology in the positive sense, of Shiva and Shakti, the quiescent, formless divine, pure Shiva, and the dynamic divine play as all these beings were really this, Shiva in disguise. So Shiva and Shakti, formlessness and the forming dynamic aspect of God is Shakti. But these two are not really two. Non-duality, Advaita. Shiva is Shakti. Formlessness is the activity of formation. And Shakti is Shiva. All forms are really formless when you really penetrate through inquiry and just curiosity and sincere longing for what is the true reality of thou, which is why many bhaktas, many devotional types in India and saints around the world, they eventually penetrated the particular name and form of God, and the divine would rapture them entirely into the namelessness, formlessness, no-thingness, the bright, clear, whole, full, divine completeness. And that's why these sages would be in rapture, for hours or days or months, for the rest of their life, even when their eyes are open, hands are functioning, mind is functioning. They say God is doing all this. You can find it in all the great mystics from St. Francis and John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, and got literally thousands of Catholic mystics and many other Protestant mystics, and again, the Jewish mystics. Jesus was a Jewish mystic, basically teaching that Abba is all in all. God is spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. The Quran has all these revelations. Wheresoever ye turn, there is the face of Allah. And la ilaha illallah, there is nothing but God, nothing but God, nothing but God. So non-duality is basically the ecstatic allowing of God to be fully formless and fully formful, forming as all creation and all beings. And then it's that old line from a 19th century New Thought church person in the US, there's not a spot where God is not. And this was the revelation too of say one of the Germanic people's great Catholic spiritual ancestors, Meister Eckhart, back in the 13th, 14th century. He basically said God is omnipresent. And God is so simple, but man gets too complex with thinking too complicated forms of theology or philosophy and becomes blind to what is always already here. He said there's an uncreated aspect of the soul. This, for a lot of kind of non-mystical Christian theologians and archbishops and popes, was considered heretical. Because in the original controversies of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century in the development of Christianity, God was the uncreated. And there was a whole, few century long argument, and it became a battle. They were hammering out the creed as to whether Jesus the Christ was uncreated or on the side of creatureliness. And they came up with a very ham-handed, kind of awkward, clumsy way of wording it, but then they only said that about Jesus, that he is fully God and fully man. But the early Christian mystics who were following Jesus' own teachings an example, was that all humans are mere creatures, mere instruments. God alone is the uncreated, yet God is everywhere and everywhen, and in everyone as their true self. And so there is this uncreated aspect of the soul, the shining, clear, divine, self-shining spirit. So Advaita, non-duality, is basically recognizing that there's only this single reality, doing everything, being everyone, dreaming this fantastic array of formations, ancient, contemporary, whatever future arisings there are, and they're all vanishing moment by vanishing moment in this great play of time. The divine is utterly quiescent, changeless, formless, and all this, including wars and the Holocaust and massacres and starvation and whatever happens in other worlds. Come up with the sci-fi filmmakers, they like to depict the horror go on in other worlds, whether it be in The Matrix or Dune, the movie Dune, so forth. But, whatever can happen, pleasurable or painful, beautiful or ugly and horrifying. What we do to animals in the so-called food industry. That's why so many of us just spontaneously go vegan on this awakening. It's like the self is in every chicken and rooster, turkey, pig, sheep, cow, beef cattle, steer. We don't want to kill these creatures. We don't need them. Their flesh is inflammatory. It's going to cause disease, diabetes, heart disease, diverticulitis, strokes, obesity, inflammation. That's why so many athletes have gone plant-based, is to calm all the inflammation down so they can recover faster and perform better and train harder. So yeah, the realization of the self will have ramifications. You won't have enemies anymore. People you might have had grudges or differences with, you'll look at them and realize it's the same self shining out of this person's eyes and this person's eyes, so-called you and me. Empathy becomes natural, spontaneous, and very profound. And empathy beautifully generates so many of the other virtues like compassion, kindness, generosity, courage, self-sacrifice for the sake of one another, unselfishness, patience. See, with an ill-behaving child or oneself, one finds maybe old conditioned tendencies, and one might feel revolted by forms of selfishness that might seem to be arising in the myself. But there's empathy and compassion for that, and a realization, oh, there's been certain old tendencies, maybe real traumas, for certain beings. And, abusive parents, or one parent, like a father, would be enough to really wound and damage a psyche for a long time. Even when there would be periods of real freedom, there might be kind of a spasmodic recontracting in the play of the body, mind, ego-G energies. There might be recontracting, but it's only passing. It's not there in deep dreamless sleep. It's not there or here in samadhi, the oneness of all the cognitive and perceptual faculties, and creates this seamless awareness, a trance state of absorption. Sri Ramana, though, advocated, don't just get into this split of active life and then feeling like you need to retreat back into some kind of samadhi, meditation, absorption. Eventually, both are the same. This is another way in which non-duality manifests. And so whether you're in a noisy, enervating, stressful environment, which is really taxing the body-mind faculties, and the sense of a me, an ego-ji, as the subject for it, a relative, narrow, finite subject. Even in that kind of enervating situation, Ramana would say, the self is the self. It's all just the dynamic Shakti happening, playing out different formations, experiences, behaviors according to prarabdha karma, destiny karma. And the sage is always inwardly, at core, the same. Whether there's the total phenomenal peaceful state of samadhi or the phenomenal state of, say, being in the midst of a very harrowing situation, like if an earthquake was happening or a fire or a flood. And the body and mind had to be extremely active and busy in trying to care for loved ones and neighbors and anyone. It would be like bedlam. There would be hyperactivity needed for that situation. Yet inwardly, it's the same as being in deep dreamless sleep or samadhi, which is why Ramana and Nisargadatta and many of the great sages, and Annamalai Swami, just to name three contemporary 20th century figures, let alone the whole tradition of India and other mystic lands and traditions, they have this idea of be like you're fully asleep while being fully awake. Ramana explained it as the deep, carefree abandon of the deep, dreamless sleep. While the eyes are open, the hands are functioning, the mind is functioning, intentions are happening, so forth. Ramana was very active around Ramanashramam. He wasn't just sitting like the mountain out in Arunachala that stood behind him. He didn't just sit all day. He would be the first one up chopping the vegetables after he'd been kind of meditating. The early risers that came in at about 3 or 4 in the morning, at some point he'd get up and go be chopping the vegetables, and he knew all the spices and best recipes and seasonal times for picking certain herbs and everything. And then he'd be maybe walking around the mountain, or he'd visit persons who were dwelling in the vicinity and ask how they are, and if they were, bodies were comfortable, if they had enough food and water to drink. So Ramana made clear the sahaja samadhi, the natural, unborn samadhi, is the samadhi or absorption state of oneness that allows for the whole play of activity and dynamism of Shakti, the divine manifesting principle. So I hope I've laid out in all this time a number of ways in which non-duality applies. It's basically saying there's no ultimate difference, fundamental difference between God and creation, God and the soul, between souls and souls. No fundamental boundary or fragmentation or alienation anywhere to be found. Because wherever you feel into, look into, perceive, you'll find only this reality, the formlessness animating all these forms. The formlessness, which is sentience in each sentient being for experiencing and acting and planning and remembering and cherishing one another. And so this deep divine stillness is love, grace, kindness, and all the virtues.
And would you say it is a choice to self-realize, or is it an inherent mechanism of this reality which sooner or later over lifetimes every one or every expression of this reality will experience sooner or later? Or how can one think about that.
As far as thoughts go, as far as speculation goes. Actually, our ancient traditions, I documented all this for master's thesis and doctor's dissertation back at California Institute of Integral Studies back in the late 70s and 80s. So the traditions make it very clear. All the mystics, the great mystics, the ancient Upanishadic tradition and the Brahma Sutra, which was an early Vedanta compilation of the gist of all the wisdom of the ancient Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the third Vedanta work after this body of Upanishad, the Brahma Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita, they form the triple scriptural canon of ancient Vedanta. And the interpretation was very Advaita, non-dual, that all beings will awaken to Brahman, the great absolute divine reality, because there is only Brahman. Krishna, speaking as the absolute, tells Arjuna in the revelation of the Bhagavad Gita scripture that all souls, all jivas will awaken to my true nature because I alone am. And this true I am nature is almighty, omnipotent, and omnipresent. So, in early Christendom, even this was taught. The teaching was suppressed in many ways or forgotten. But early on, it was quite clear, especially in the writings of St. Paul, let alone what Jesus himself had said and some of the other followers, like James in his epistle, that because God is all-powerful, because God is all-animating, omnipresent in every one, including Satan and the demons and all the beings of the hell realms, God's love will eventually triumph. Love will eventually awaken all beings back to divine realization. This had a very formal early Christian Greek. They used Coptic Greek. There's a term for it, apokatastasis. Apokatastasis. And it means the universal salvation, redemption, liberation, or awakening, because there is only God. Only God. The Muslim Sufis had this teaching as well. So the idea of a permanent eternal hell, it's just it's a hermeneutics. it's an expedient device, what the Buddhists would call an upaya, to kind of get beings alert and sincere and passionately interested in what is really happening here, so that there's not just the playing out of old samskaras, old conditioning for the personal consciousness, with its distractions and foibles and failings and flaws. There's a kind of a stop. When you teach a doctrine of eternal damnation, people are going to stop and go, oh my God, I hope that doesn't happen to me. But it's just like what a mother might yell out to a child who's getting too close to a fireplace, with a live fire burning in the hearth. They might call out something which was not entirely true just to shock the child and make them come back if they were not heeding earlier warnings about getting too close to the fire. So in the same way, that teaching about eternal hell is this. It's an ad hoc, to use Latin, an expedient teaching for certain beings in certain situations. If you will, it's a kind of institutional religion, crowd control, to keep people from becoming sociopaths, if possible, and behave themselves, properly. But with true non-dual spirituality, we don't need these kind of expedient threats. And the true realization is that the divine is everywhere and everywhen. And so all beings will awaken. Now, the question is, well, when? Some people say, I've been meditating for years, I've been reading scriptures. My heartfelt sense of that for certain persons is that there's an amount of trying too hard. And sometimes it's usually almost 99.9% the case, they're looking for divine realization, true self-realization, as some kind of phenomenon, a happening, a thing that will arise in mind field or the sense of heart energy. But this, which is divine, is always on the open near end of who you are. Just recede back, as Sri Nisargadatta would say, just recede back into what you always already are as this open, vast, absolute nature, unchanging, unborn. So what's happening is people are kind of looking for God or the self or spiritual realization as a phenomenon kind of out there in the mind. I need to move toward it. I'm going to turn sideways just to make it more clear. Like, I need to move toward that. When in fact, it's about looking right back up into who you are already on the open near end. My old friend, the late great British mystic Douglas Harding, his friend and student Richard Lang created the website headless.org, headless.org, because Douglas had one of his early books, it was his second book, it was a little, very short, readable thing after a big compendium he had made about spiritual realization in the sacred traditions. His second book was called On Having No Head. He said, I woke up one day and realized what was the source or capacity for seeing and hearing and so forth. Douglas was an architect, so he was primarily visual. Almost all his metaphors are visual ones, but we can actually use them in any mode. Hearing, I could share that with you in a few minutes, or touch. But he became really clear that all arising sights, colors, shapes, visual textures, lines and edges, all of that is pointing back to this which is unseeable. Our most ancient Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka, had said, the great Brahman, the supreme Atman self, is the unseen seer of seeing. It also said the unheard hearer of hearing, the unthought thinker of thinking, the unfelt feeler of feeling. In other words, what Chan and Mahayana Buddhism in China would use so often, this idea of the host. Our absolute nature is the ever-free, formless host, this whole variety of formations and worlds and beings and experiences. So to look for God as an experience is already upside down and wrong-headed from the beginning. It's very natural because as spirit, associating with and identifying with this ego-g viewpoint, this finite, limited viewpoint onto reality, what we call the personal consciousness, and then its sub-instruments that it identifies with, the play of perception and sensation, that is the mind faculty, and then the bodily sensations, bodily energies. All of these phenomena, all these things, all these objects of experience are what the personal consciousness is used to. And so naturally, the personal consciousness, when told about the God self or the great possible realization, begins to look for this in the field of experience, when in fact you are always the open capacity for experience, on the near end, the open end, closer than close, right here, capital H-E-R-E, right here on the open end of all experiencing, is the open formless reality you have always already been, that each and every one has always already been. So anyone can awaken to this at any time by simply allowing a loss of temporary interest in what's external, to prioritize in self-inquiry or looking for God or aspiring for spirit, to not presume that you will find this as a that or an it in the land of experience, because experience is arise and pass. Sri Ramana famously told some people who had come to him, and they would be forlorn and depressed because maybe years ago they had had a great vision of God, a sense of God's presence in their heart, mind, in their life. Maybe it lasted for months, but then, oh, I'm no longer feeling it. Ramana, how do I get that back? And Ramana would say, dear one, what's the use of a God who comes and goes? The real God is your true nature as the self. This does not leave. This cannot go anywhere. This is your unmoving true nature. So Ramana made it clear that God is not some phenomenal phenomenon, some spectacular experience, but this natural, open, totally miraculously capable divine reality, this which is coming up with all the visions of God and experiences of different worlds, high and low, this natural, true nature self, the divine self, is always here. So, Shankara, a great interpreter of the ancient Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutra, he was the great classic era sagely philosopher. The scholars have pushed his dates back a couple of generations, so we now want to say he was probably in the 7th century, the 600s of the Common Era. Shankara made it clear that the self awakens to the self through and by the self, and the self awakens when it does. But really, because time is just an illusion in our timeless eternity, always it is the case that everyone is always self-realized. Ramana would joke about this, and other sages have joked about the great lila, the play or sport, game, or dream play, swapna, lila, of the divine, that the personal consciousness pretends that it is not always already rooted in and as the self. So that's why the true sages don't make spirituality a big heavy thing and threaten you and berate you and put you down for being all ego identified. No true sage does that. In fact, a friend of mine uploaded to YouTube, his YouTube channel, Infinitely Mystical, a segment of a Satsang I shared. I shared it a number of times over the years on the true graciousness of Ramana Maharshi, because when he would look at people, he didn't see them as some unenlightened schmuck, some idiot. No, he saw through their phenomenal nature of body processes, mind processes, and the ego-ji, dear instrument of personal consciousness expression in the world. No, he saw all the way through that to what was always already omnipresent inside Ramana, inside you, inside each and every one, the self. And he knew this self is the very principle of wholeness, fullness. Purnam, 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 as an ancient Priyadanika hymn repeats. And so no one is really lacking anything. And so one way of coming back to one's awakened, intrinsically awake nature is to relax. Simply relax. Find any method of relaxation that allows one to just be and see and feel that we are always already gloriously free, that what we are is not a body or its processes, its birth, growth, old age, or death. You're not the mind processes, which are miraculous, processes of short-term, medium-term, long-term memory, concept formation, etc., all forms of association and reasoning and planning. These are miraculous activities, and they are not who we truly are. They're arising, beautiful phenomena that allow for spectacular functioning. And the very personal consciousness sense of a me is just an instrument. It's jada, as the ancient Upanishads say, inert, merely an instrument. Just like the moon is not the source of its own light, but is lit up by the sun, light reflecting off of it. The personal consciousness appears to be sentient and alive and feeling and capable only because of the divine sentience and infinite capacity that's expressing through the ego-G instrument. So one relaxes and trusts that all of this phenomenal play of body, mind, ego-G is merely phenomenal, not one's true nature, experientially real within the great divine dream. This self and all dear selves, not just human, but animal and subtle plane beings, heaven dwellers, the devas, our ancestors, ghostly beings, and so forth. All of these beings are only existing and flourishing because of the absolute divine being, this which animates each and every one. And so trust that the divine is totally intimate, gaplessly closer than close, not far away. Watch out for language in English and in certain European languages, the equivalent of the word it or that, even though these terms have been used when translating from ancient non-dual scriptures. I find in the psycholinguistics that when we think of the self as it, or God as that, it immediately creates distance, because that's what language does. You know, this it right here, 2 feet away from me or 2 meters away from me, and that thing 10 meters away. We see how language is all about phenomena. So we can actually use language to kind of point back to what's always already here. This, the I am, the true I. We need not presume any kind of separation or distance. Remember, the divine is not only utterly transcendental, but fully immanent within all beings. So part of the awakening, for it to happen, if you will, more quickly within the great play of time, is to simply drop everything. Stop. Let go, let God. Be still, summa iro, meaning inwardly at that innermost core. Don't be restless trying to find or strive or grope for something. Allow your true nature to be utterly settled as this, the divine spirit, open awareness, the host for all experiences and states and so forth. And then there can be this sudden awakening, the direct intuition, the formless, purely spiritual intuition. It's not a psychic intuition about phenomena like, hovering spirits or nature spirits. That's a psychic intuition. What's being called for in the great tradition is the knowing by being wisdom, which we call jnana in ancient India. The Buddhists came up with the term prajna, and that jna root is the root for our Western word in gnosis. The G-N-O comes from the ancient Sanskrit J-N-A. All of these in this jna root was known by the ancient mystics of India, and it spread southwest and west and northwest. This term was known to be the knowing by being that clearly realizes that God is always here. Reality is always real, right here, closer than close, instantaneous. No time needed to find this, no space needed to traverse, which is why even the language of a spiritual path is misleading, because it implies a me, a thing here that needs to get over there to see that divine or find that supernal, supreme reality. Now the supernal, supreme reality is always looking through your eyes, beating your heart, feeling every feeling, experiencing every experience. let's make this really clear, if you will, with an experiential, intuitional processes that will wake you up to what's at the source of experience and what this pure intuition is. We close the eyes. Because humans are so visual, we get distracted by visual objects. We look at and see things, and they seem solid. Whereas we actually know with subatomic physics, everything that seems like a thing is just this shimmering, buzzing, blooming quantum mystery of vibration and frequencies and mysteries and paradoxes. So we're actually tricked when we look visually and see what we think are relatively solid objects. With the sense of hearing, it becomes much more clear, and I won't say obvious, because the word obvious refers to objects, a word that I coined many years ago to make this clear as subvious. We're going to realize the subvious truth, what's always here as subject. So with the eyes closed, notice that there's different kinds of sounds. Sounds arise in the process of time, and they're very changeable. So when I say the word now, by the time I get to the W sound, the N now is already a memory. It's a memory trace. It's vanished. I've been striking a gong, and there's an initial vibrational moment and then subsequent moments, but they fade out. The whole process of hearing sounds is like attuning to a streaming river, a river of ever-changing moments of sound impulses. They are massaging your hearing sense. We know how the process works physiologically, psychophysiologically, about little organs within the inner ear canal being stimulated by sound waves, and it triggers the firing of neurons that send signals down an auditory nerve to parts of the temporal lobe in the brain and so forth. But the actual experience of hearing, the sound of a voice arising and vanishing, these are all momentary pulses of sounds arising and passing, arising and passing, arising and passing. Now, if we gave you the world's best earplugs and turned off all sound, or we cut that auditory nerve in the brain, there would be the experience of hearing total silence. But now, whether there is the presence of auditory sounds or the phenomenal presence of mere silence, absence of sounds, don't you intuitively have the sense deep down as the unheard hearer of hearing, the host for hearing? Don't you have the sense of always being the same changeless, inaudible silence? Your true nature as awareness, host awareness, is this radical divine silence, stillness, openness, formlessness, in which these sounds, these vibrational impulses arise and massage the hearing sense and create the brain sensations of sound and the interpretation of sound as, for instance, meaningful words of language. You are the changeless, unborn, formless host for all hearing of sounds, seeing of sights, tasting of tastes, smelling of smells, fragrances, any possible vibrations of form that can arise as part of the phenomenal play of the worlds. Any phenomena that arise are all pointing back to thou, the true I am, the open awareness, absolute self-nature. All phenomena are pointing back, O thou host, thou art the one hearing. And these sounds which are arising and passing, changing, arising, passing, transforming, they don't truly affect who and what you are as formlessness. If the loudest machine, like a jackhammer or a bomb, went off, on the phenomenal level, the hearing would be very impacted. Those inner organs in the ear canal might be traumatized, injured, damaged beyond repair. But as the host for sounds and silence, phenomenal silence, you are the original silence, and you are never affected, never damaged, never changed. And so for the true sageliness that you are, it doesn't matter whether you're in a quiet meditation retreat or in the busiest part of an urban area with buses and cars honking, loud building equipment, construction equipment. You are always the supreme silence. Whether the body-mind talks or not, you are the supreme silence. And so there's no need to make an enemy of words. Ramana used words, he read words, he would read the newspaper daily. So words and sounds, noises, music, none of these are the enemy or the opponent of what you are as the supreme silence, the original silence, the divine truth. Satchidananda Om. Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnahat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamaiva Vasishyate. Oh, thou art the supreme fullness. Thou give rise to the cosmos out of supreme fullness, and nothing is left unfull in thy true nature when a cosmos arises. And when the cosmos vanishes back into what thou art, only fullness remains. Fullness, wholeness, Purnam, Purnam. You are always complete as this divine host for all experiences, all hearing, seeing, talking, moving. The change of the states from waking to dreamless sleep, back into dreams, into waking state. All these changes that go on through the 24 hours of each day. You are the changeless, the host for these revolving, passing states. The realization is being absolutely convinced of this. Formlessness is thy truth. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, beyond any phenomenal complications, beyond the linguistic complications of, oh, I would be realized if only, or but, however. All the play of language, all the play of bodily sensations and mind functions, interpersonal relationships. All of these beautiful, beautiful manifestations of the divine dynamic Shakti are spontaneously happening by the power and grace and supreme intelligence of the Supreme Self. Everything and everyone has a happy ending because all is resolved in God, all is absorbed back into God. Because all arises and vanishes moment by moment in God, the supreme Brahman, Atman, reality, true self. So a momentary thought might arise, oh, how unenlightened this jiva, this self, this personal consciousness is. That's a thought that arises or a perception that arises. It might be empirically, experientially true in the moment, but in the next moment, it's not real. Another arising impulse has come. Check that out. Another arising impulse. Check that out and realize that all arising impulsive phenomena, relational, inwardly experiential in the play of the higher mind or lower mind, bodily sensations, all these arising phenomena are pointing back to who you really are, the open awareness, the simple isness of absolute being, absolute being. Intrinsically, what you are, there is no problem with this. No possible problem with this. There's only fullness here, completeness, wholeness, and holiness, and healedness. All those words, holy, wholesome, healed, they all come from the same Western language root words of all is well. In thy true nature, perfection, perfection, perfection. As for the process of phenomena and the jiva, the self, the personal consciousness, becoming more and more virtuous and letting go of the unwholesome conditioning, the attachments and aversions and phobias and forms of pettiness and so forth, that whole playing out of the purifying of the personal consciousness, which is the form of cellular evolution through this life, what other lifetimes are happening for the personal consciousness. We trust that this is a case of perfection, perfecting itself perfectly. And that's a whole dramatic play. And that's why we have such great literature and stage plays and movies and music, songs, testifying to the drama of the souls and their unfolding, their transforming, their being redeemed from vice into virtue, from hell to divinity. That all plays out in the beautiful, marvelous, miraculous, divine dream play of space, time, worlds upon worlds. But you don't go anywhere, oh absolute. Your true nature, your real self doesn't move, change, lessen, or increase. You are always divine fullness, Purnam, Purnam, Purnam. So spirituality is this lovely twofoldness within the non-duality. That on the experiential level, there's so much more eternal, infinite growth. Even the Buddhas, probably on the phenomenal level, are finding new capacities and perfecting perfection perfectly in their manifestation. But what we are in our instantaneous, timeless, always right here, closer than close true nature, is not a matter for evolution. This is this, absolutely. So spiritually, there's a kind of twofold knowingness. There's this knowing by being of the subvious, subjectively obvious, subvious truth that we are the absolute. And then there's this also being with the dynamic play of Shakti and functioning and allowing different things to be healed, or like say if you're an artist or a musician or in any kind of profession, there can be improving of the skill set, new learnings, growth and attaining more and more levels of magnificence. It's a remarkable divine who is both formless and forming, who is beyond everything and everyone and within everyone and everything, shining as their vital force, their vital power. This is the divine Shakti, who is always one with and not different from Shiva. In other words, God's emanation is animated and lit up and empowered by God, the Godhead. It's all only God, only God, only God. So if there's still some part of the mind that has doubts, that says, well, this can't be true of me, or maybe if it is true, and when will it really be clear? What are you before those thoughts even arise? Find out through self-inquiry, atma-vichara, find out who or what am I, what is the true nature right here, prior to the arising of any thought, prior to the happening of any phenomenal experience. What are you as this open, formless, simple reality? So a presumption of being unawake arises. Is that presumption true? You find out right here, right now, no. There's only formlessness, changelessness, unborn, uncompounded Buddha nature. That's why the great late medieval Zen master of Japan, Benkei, Zen master Benkei, he said, don't get born, that is identified with this or that phenomenon or set of phenomena. Find out what you always already are as the unborn, simple, clear, pure, pristine Buddha nature. This is thy truth. Directly awakening to this, the spontaneous cultivation of the virtues and straightening out of karmas and so forth, all that happens. That's why in old Chan and Son Buddhism of China and Korea, and a few of the Zen masters of Japan also heard it and shared it, this teaching of sudden awakening, direct awakening to Buddha nature, spontaneously, naturally followed by the expression of the cultivation of virtues. But it's not like striving to become this or that from a sense of being an ego, trying to cultivate the virtues. No, they spontaneously blossom with authentic awakening to Buddha nature. And then it's just a simple matter of checking, noticing if any selfish tendencies are arising and seeing them off. They're not absolute. They're not inherently true of who thou art. They're just part of the conditioning process for the personal consciousness, maybe involving lifetime chains, reincarnational chains. But truly, you are the non-incarnate one, not incarnate in the carne, the meat. You're not trapped in the meat. As the absolute, you manifest out of infinite awareness, the universal play of consciousness, the Om, Maya play, the dance of Shakti. And within this universal consciousness play, individual personal consciousnesses by the countless gazillions are being emanated. Human persons, animal persons, celestial beings. And the personae are transparent for the universal consciousness, and this dynamic universal Shakti power of manifestation is transparent for absolute awareness right here. Supreme no thing, formless reality. So there can be absolute faith and trust in this. Doubts may arise, let them go the way they came. Whatever arises, vanishes. A thought impulse arises, and the next moment it's gone. Even if it seems like another identical thought process and another. So it seems like there's a solid stream of thought. It's not solid. Nothing is solid. But what you are is solid. In the play of phenomena, no solidity. It's all churning and changing and vanishing. That's the blessed thing. All the unenlightened, apparent unenlightened states are always vanishing. Find out this clear light, the true enlightenment, the enlightened nature, this clear light reality. Find out how this is always here, always true, immediate, instant, completely here, now. And then it's just allowing the divine to share. What did Sri Nisargadatta once say to some of us? The whole essence of realization is being happy, making happy. And you're only truly happy and will spontaneously make happiness around when there's been this stopping and or receding back into what thou art naturally, without artificiality, without pomposity, the narrow sense of I'm enlightened, you're not. That's why I spoke often over the years about Ramana Maharshi's graciousness. He saw everyone as just as enlightened as himself, because there is only the self, the true nature, the full, complete true nature of each and every one. You know this already. Trust this intrinsic knowing by being. Trust this. So many of the ancient Advaita Nondual works that starting from some of the interactions described between, say, a sage and a disciple in the Upanishads, and then with Arjuna, hearing Lord Krishna's instruction about the true nature of the divine, his true nature, everyone's true nature. And then later works like Yoga Vasishta, a classic of Advaita literature, came out of northern India. Apparently the core of it started arising around the 5th, 6th, 7th century of the Common Era. Works like Yoga Vasishta, subsequent works like Tripura Rahasya and Ribhu Gita and Ashtavraka Gita, Avadhuta Gita. These kind of texts all involve a great sage of non-duality speaking to the sageliness within the listener. And eventually the listener wakes up. The doubts are clarified. And even if a doubt thought arose, it would be seen as such, just a arising, vanishing thought. It's not who we truly are. And so total persuasion or conviction about the truth of our true nature dawns. And then it's just allowing this dawning sunlight of the self to shine, shine, shine. It never has any obstruction. This true nature never has any obstruction, no hindrance, no problem, no diminishment. I hope all my words in English are clear to listeners who know beautiful, beloved Simon from his podcast and English English is maybe a second language. Maybe there is the chance if you replay this, you can slow the speed down, make my voice go much deeper, and the words will slow down. And these 2 and 3 and 4 syllable words will slow down and be more easily understood. But remember, you are the great divine silence in which all phenomenal moments of silence or phenomenal moments of sound and language arise and vanish. You are the host for the entire stream of pulsing creation, emanation, dream functioning. You are the host for this stream. You are the stream bed, the groundless ground for whatever arises. You are the very substance of whatever happens. Whatever happens in the realm of phenomena is made of you, O divine, O formlessness. Thy forms are all you. Is this clear? Hallelujah. This is clear. We could use some old Milton Ericksonian hypnosis if it doesn't seem clear. Well, when will it be clear? In another 40 seconds? 40 minutes? 4 days? You don't need 4 days, but it can happen already. Any awakening to our true nature, because our true nature is timelessly, eternally now. But Milton Erickson found a way of using medical hypnosis and psychotherapeutic hypnosis. He's a great sagely hypnotherapist back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. He came up with interesting questions to de-hypnotize people from their hypnotized forms of pathology and restlessness and so forth, so that things would dawn for people. And in this case, the no thing of reality can dawn at any moment. And so Milton Erickson might say, do you want to wake up right now? 4 seconds ago? Do you want to wake up in 10 seconds? Why wait? But if you will, tomorrow, tonight, any time is the time for the timeless, which is the host for all temporary moments. Just always remember that awakening doesn't happen as an experience for me in the realm of phenomena. It's this natural, simple, sweet, pure, clear, divine realization of what you always already are, what everyone always already is. The reality always here, doing everything and being everyone. The subvious truth of who the true subject is. All right. All right. All sounds are announcing the soundless silence. All sights are announcing the clear light formlessness. All bodily sensations, smells, and tastes are all pointing to their very own substance, which is the absolute. Whatever arises in experience is always pointing back to the host, the seamless, full, pure, clear host of all experiences. Shiva and Shakti, not two, but one. Om Namo Shiva Shakti Namo. Om Namo Shiva Shakti Namo. All homage to the great formless divine and formful dynamic divine who are one. Maybe two sides of one coin. We could simply be silent for many minutes, but as Sri Nisargadatta made very clear, first words, then natural silence, and that one's not attached to silence. So there can be singing of devotional songs or a beautiful pop song about love of the lover for the beloved. All of these kind of songs are pointing to the soul's love for its source and substance, the pure, clear, divine spirit. That's why Sri Annamalai Swami, I think it was on our second time for meeting. The first time I got to be with him just in silence, one-on-one, for about 45 minutes. But the next day he said, now go down the road to the center of the town of Annamalai, a couple of miles away. His ashram was right next door to Ramana Ashramam to the west. He said, walk down the road past Ramana Ashramam down to the town of Annamalai and go to the busiest hub where the roads all come together, the loudest, noisiest, smelliest part of town, and have that be the same experience as sitting silently in meditation. Experientially, it will feel different. The vibrations are different. The frequencies, the smells, the sounds are different than sitting in, say, Annamalai Swami's little hermitage ashram there, the huge tree and the mountain, sacred mountain behind. But inwardly, as for who you really are, there's no difference whether, again, you're in the busy urban pandemonium, the noise and smells, or whether, say, sitting peacefully in meditation under that tree out at the ashram. That's why the real freedom is freedom in all worlds, with all states, with all experiences, with all relationships. The true sage, your true sageliness, is always free, regardless of the circumstances. Because whatever circumstances arise are obviously the divine manifestation of your subvious divine truth. So, Simon is lost for us. We who are paying attention to phenomena, he is beyond phenomena, self-abiding as the natural, intrinsic, formless purity. kitty cat wants to contribute sounds. Love to you, Simon.
Love to
to
you.
Brenda and Coco and all your viewers, listeners. Love is dreaming all this, playing us this.
Thank you very much.
We thank the one dreaming these jivas. Shiva is each jiva, and yet dreams a jiva dream, and yet there is always only Shiva, or only God. Only God. Wonderful program and service you have for your beings throughout the cyberspace world who can tune in. The shining light of the clear light in your eyes is just a hint of what you are as absolute formless radiance. The dazzling darkness of God, as Meister Eckhart said so long ago. We sing it right now. God is all lights, the dazzling darkness of the clear light. All love, all graciousness. How can one not be blissful? How can one not be ecstatically in love with each and every form of the beloved? Each and every one encounters. Boundless hugs, dear friend.
Yeah, there's not much to say. Yeah, thank you so much.
That's why we would, in our Santa Barbara satsangs for many years, we'd open with whatever, 25, 30 minutes or so of silence. But after the words, Sri Nisargadatta said, true words come true of you. Then there'd just be singing. What's left when one has used prose? Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Shiva Om Namo. And for many of you, you'll dance it. Not just sing it, but dance it. You'll personify it in all interpersonal relations, but everyone you were fortunate to meet, and they will be fortunate to meet you, because there is only thou, the true I. Wow. I think it's time for dinner for Simon and Brenda and Coco, if she's not already fed your beautiful doggy. And
thank you so much, Timothy, for this, I don't know how to call it, conversation, sharing, experience.
That's what we are. And you beautifully manifest the Shiva quiescent silence while the Timothy Shakti doll dances on and on with the words and insights and concepts and scriptural aphorisms, but it's all the same. You are the same. O listener, sameness is thy truth. Sameness of the divine nature. We celebrate this, we cherish this, we honor this. Namaskaram. Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
And so thou, O Shiva, must absorb all forms into thyself. One must end the podcast, vanish it,